The emergency klaxon wailed as Nolan Foster fought to keep the Artemis from breaking apart. His survey vessel shuddered, atmospheric friction turning the viewports molten orange. "Come on, baby, hold together," he muttered, rerouting power from life support to stabilizers. His training as an interstellar scout had prepared him for emergencies, but not for the gravitational anomaly that had yanked him from hyperspace. Into this uncharted system, the planet rushing toward him gleamed azure and emerald breathable. Atmosphere according to his failing instruments, but completely absent from colonial records. Perfect for his unplanned landing. "Mayday, mayday." Scout vessel Artemis requesting immediate assistance, Nolan broadcast, knowing the signal would take weeks to reach the nearest outpost. Emergency landing coordinates to follow. Pilot Foster still breathing. For now, impact came with a sickening crunch of metal. Nolan's harness cut into his shoulders as the ship plowed through dense foliage. Finally skidding to a halt in a clearing, silence descended, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the ping of his emergency beacon activating. 28 days, he mumbled, checking the timer. Great. 28 days until the emergency protocols would bring a rescue team, if they could find him. Nolan forced the emergency hatch, wincing as pain lanced through his ribs. Outside, humid air filled his lungs, carrying strange floral scents and something metallic. The jungle canopy towered overhead, filtering sunlight through leaves the size of dinner plates. He staggered away from the wreckage, survival kit clutched to his chest. He made it perhaps 50 meters before dizziness overcame him. Leaning against a tree with bark like polished obsidian, Nolan tried to assess his injuries. Cracked ribs definitely, possibly a concussion, numerous lacerations. Nothing immediately fatal. The rustling began, so gradually he almost missed it. Then came the sensation of being watched, a prickling awareness that raised the hair on his neck. Nolan's hand moved to his sidearm. "I wouldn't," said a melodious voice. Emerging from the undergrowth came 6 figures that made Nolan question his concussion. Women, unmistakably women, but with skin that shimmered with a faint purple iridescence. They moved with predatory grace, surrounding him in a loose semicircle. Each carried weapons that blended primitive design with advanced technology, bows with glowing energy strings, blades that hummed with power. Their leader stepped forward, and Nolan forgot to breathe. She stood tall, her athletic form accentuated by fitted armor of some flexible material. Her hair fell in silver-white waves around a face of striking beauty, high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes the color of twilight. The purple shimmer of her skin seemed to pulse slightly with her breathing. "You're real," she said, her accent making the words sound like music. She circled him, maintaining a careful distance. A male. After all this time, Nolan swallowed hard. "Last time I checked, name's Nolan Foster, scout for the Terran Alliance. My ship crashed. I'd appreciate medical attention and contact with my people." The woman's lips curved into a smile that sent a shiver down his spine, not entirely from fear. "I am Verity, Hunt Commander of Nixa Colony." She gestured to her companions. "By our laws, you are subject to right of first claim." Her eyes traveled down his body with open interest. "I found you first." One of the younger hunters leaned forward eagerly. "His coloring is strange, Verity. Look at his eyes, like amber stone." An older warrior with intricate markings on her face snorted. "Don't get attached, Juno. The council will decide his fate." "The council can debate all they wish," Verity said, her gaze never leaving Nolan. "First claim is mine." She extended her hand. "Come, stranger from the stars. Our settlement awaits." Nolan weighed his options. 28 days until rescue. Unknown planet, unknown civilization, and a woman whose presence affected him in ways he couldn't explain. He took her hand. Her skin felt fever warm against his palm, and something like electricity passed between them. She didn't immediately release his grip. "What if I refuse?" he asked. Verity's smile turned predatory. "Then my sisters will carry you. Trust me, you'll prefer walking." As the hunters closed around him, Nolan realized his survival now depended on navigating a society where he was clearly an unexpected discovery and potentially a valuable one. The dying colony, the settlement of Nixa, unfolded before Nolan like something from a fevered dream. Massive trees spiraled upward, their trunks hollowed and shaped into multi-level dwellings connected by bridges of living wood. Bioluminescent fungi provided gentle illumination, while streams defied gravity, flowing through channels that curved impossibly through the air. Yet beneath the wonder, Nolan noticed signs of decay. Empty structures stood abandoned, their living walls browning with neglect. The population seemed sparse for such an extensive settlement. "It's dying," he murmured. Verity walked beside him, her warriors maintaining a loose perimeter. "Yes," she replied, emotion absent from her voice. "We all are." They ascended a spiral staircase carved into a colossal tree trunk. Verity's quarters occupied a natural hollow near the top, furnished with pieces that seemed grown rather than built. Cushions of woven plant fiber surrounded a low table, while weapons hung from hooks that sprouted directly from the walls. "Sit," Verity commanded, gesturing toward the cushions. "Let me see your injuries." "I'm fine," Nolan started, then hissed as she pressed against his ribs. 3 cracked ribs and a concussion, she diagnosed, her hands moving with clinical efficiency. "The crash should have killed you. Built tough, I guess." Nolan tried to ignore how her touch sent electricity through his nervous system. "What happened here?" "To your people," Verity's hands stilled. "The separation, 3 centuries ago, our population divided. The males departed to establish their own colony across the southern sea. Departed, or were driven out." Nolan watched her face carefully. "History is written by survivors," she answered cryptically. "We adapted to life without them. Parthenogenesis, self-reproduction. But it's failing now. That's why everything's dying." Verity stood abruptly, pacing to the window overlooking the colony. "Our genetics are compromised. Immune deficiencies, birth defects, infertility. Each generation weaker than the last. And then I fell out of the sky," Nolan said quietly. "Yes." She didn't turn around. "Then you fell out of the sky." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to voice. Later, Verity led Nolan to a vast chamber carved from the heart of the great tree. 20 women sat in a circle, their iridescent skin ranging from deep violet to pale lavender. At the circle's head sat a woman whose ancient face held the cold intelligence of a predator. "High Counselor Sophia," Verity murmured. "She upholds tradition." Across the circle sat a younger woman with scientific instruments at her belt. "That's Talia, our chief geneticist. She's pragmatic." Sophia raised one pale hand, and silence fell over the chamber. "Sisters, we gather to determine the fate of this male that has fallen into our midst." Her gaze fixed on Nolan with predatory intensity. "The ancient laws speak of males as vessels of chaos. Yet our colony faces extinction. His biological value is undeniable." Talia interjected. "His genetic material could restore diversity to our lineage. The question is how to utilize this resource efficiently." "Resource?" Nolan felt his temper flare. "I'm not a resource to be utilized." "You do not speak here," Sophia cut him off. "You are subject to our laws now." Actually, Verity stood, her voice carrying new authority. "He is subject to right of first claim, which belongs to me. Your claim can be transferred," Sophia suggested with a smile that promised consequences. "Not without my consent," Verity countered. Talia cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should study our guest before making irreversible decisions. Learn about his people, his compatibility with our biology." "Very well," Sophia conceded reluctantly. 3 days for research. Then we implement proper breeding protocols." As the council members filed out, Nolan caught fragments of conversation that made his skin crawl. Words like genetic distribution and reproductive viability featured prominently. Verity's hand remained on his arm as the chamber emptied. "That went better than expected." "Better?" Nolan stared at her. "They want to use me as a breeding stock. I know what they want." Verity's twilight eyes held depths he was only beginning to fathom. "The question is, what do you want?" The question hung between them like a blade. Nolan studied her face, noting the way her jaw tightened with suppressed emotion. "I want to understand," he said finally. "This place, your people, you." Something flickered in Verity's expression, surprise perhaps, or hope. "Dangerous words, Skyman." Her lips curved into a half-smile. "Nolan," he corrected. "My name is Nolan, Nolan." She spoke his name like tasting wine. 3 days to prove you're more than genetic material. And then, her smile held shadows of things he couldn't yet comprehend. Then we discovered just how civilized my people really are. Dawn broke through the canopy in prismatic shards. Nolan woke to find Verity already gone. Only the lingering scent of exotic spice marking where she'd slept nearby close enough to guard, distant enough to torment. He found her on the platform, outside, practicing with curved blades that moved like liquid mercury in her hands. Her iridescent skin gleamed with perspiration that caught the morning light like amethyst dust. "Sleep well?" she asked without breaking her routine, like a baby. If babies usually worry about becoming breeding stock. Nolan stretched, working out kinks from sleeping on plant fiber cushions. "What's on today's agenda?" Verity sheathed her weapons with practiced fluidity. "The council reconvenes tonight. Sophia has been rallying support for her position. The breeding program, among other things." Verity turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "There are places I need to show you. Things you need to understand before I become a prize bull. Before you make choices that affect more than just yourself." Her voice carried an edge of urgency. "Come. The old archives hold truths the council prefers forgotten. The ancient library lay buried beneath the colony's roads, accessible only through tunnels that spiraled deep into the great tree's heart. Crystalline formations embedded in the walls provided ethereal light, casting dancing shadows. This place predates our recorded history," Verity explained as they descended worn stone steps. "Built by the first settlers, before the separation." "You mean the exile," Nolan said quietly. Verity's steps faltered. "What makes you say that? Your society is matriarchal. Your people reproduce without males, yet you're dying from genetic degradation. It doesn't take a quantum physicist to see what happened." The crystals at a sealed doorway dissolved at Verity's touch, revealing a vast chamber filled with floating data streams that writhed through the air like living things. Archive nodes hung suspended from the ceiling, pulsing with stored information. "Incredible." Nolan breathed. "How much data is stored here?" 3 millennia of history, science, philosophy, all forbidden by current law. Why? Because it contradicts everything Sophia and her faction believe. A holographic display flickered to life, showing star charts and genetic sequences. The official history claims males were violent creatures who threatened our peaceful society, that we were forced to defend ourselves, but that's not what happened. No. Verity's voice carried centuries of buried shame. We were the aggressors. The hologram shifted, showing population graphs and resource allocation charts. The story they told was ugly systematic discrimination, political marginalization that had spiraled into conflict. Your ancestors didn't vanish, Verity continued. We drove them away to preserve our pure society, and now you're dying because of it. Nolan traced genetic degradation curves with his finger. Parthenogenesis works for a few generations, but without genetic diversity. Each generation weaker than the last, Verity confirmed. We have perhaps 50 years before complete reproductive collapse. She turned to face him, her expression haunted. Do you understand what you represent, Nolan? You're not just a man, you're proof that the male bloodline continues somewhere, that we might yet. She didn't finish, but he heard the desperate hope in her voice, and something else, something that made his pulse quicken despite their situation. There's more, he said. It wasn't a question. Verity nodded, leading him deeper into the archives where the passages narrowed. The deepest records, the ones that could get us both executed for accessing. They squeezed through a gap in the crystalline walls. Verity's body pressed against his. Her breath came quick and shallow against his neck. The males who left, they established a colony across the southern sea, she whispered. For generations, we've been told they died out. But look, a final display activated, showing satellite imagery of a settlement on a distant shore and atmospheric sensor data, indicating pollution consistent with industrial development. They're alive, Nolan said, and thriving, by the looks of it. Yes, but isolated, just as we are. They must be facing similar genetic issues. Suddenly, the earth trembled, ancient stone groaned as the passage began to collapse. Dust rained down while crystal formations cracked and sparked. Nolan pulled Verity against him as the tunnel filled with falling debris. They pressed into a tiny alcove. As the passage sealed behind tons of rubble, darkness swallowed them whole. The emergency lights should, Verity's voice cut off as she realized how close they were. Her body molded against his in the confined space. He could feel her heart hammering against his chest. Verity, he started, but she pressed her fingers against his lips. I've dreamed of this, she whispered in the darkness. Of someone who could bridge our worlds, someone real. Her hand found his face, tracing the line of his jaw with trembling fingers. In the absolute darkness, every sensation intensified the silk of her skin, the warmth radiating from her body. Verity, we can't what? Her voice held a challenge. Can't want each other? Can't feel something beyond politics and genetics and the weight of dying civilizations? Their faces were so close he could feel her breath against his lips. The darkness made everything else fall away. Duty, consequences, the impossible situation they found themselves in. There was only her warmth, her scent, the electric tension crackling between them. I've wanted to do this since I first saw you, she breathed. Escape plans. Their lips met in the darkness, tentative at first, then with growing urgency. Nolan pulled Verity closer, one hand tangling in her silver-white hair. She tasted of exotic spice and desire, her body pressing against his with increasing boldness. We shouldn't, he murmured against her mouth, even as his hands traced the curve of her spine. We're trapped in a cave-in that may kill us, Verity replied, her fingers working at the fastenings of his tattered uniform. What better time? Her skin glowed faintly in the darkness, casting just enough light to see the hunger in her eyes. Time lost meaning as they explored each other, discovering similarities and thrilling differences. Their bodies moved together, with increasing urgency, finding a rhythm as ancient as the stars. Later, as they lay entangled in the dim phosphorescence of her skin, Verity traced patterns across his chest. Your rescue countdown. How many days remain? 26, Nolan replied, calculating. But that's assuming they can track my beacon through the planet's magnetic field. Then we have 26 days to prevent a war. She pushed herself up, on one elbow, because that's what will happen if your people arrive unprepared. Sophia and the traditionalists will see them as invaders, and your other faction, Talia and the pragmatists, Verity's expression darkened. They'll see them as a genetic resource to be harvested. Neither outcome benefits anyone. A distant rumbling interrupted them. Light suddenly speared through the rubble as rocks shifted. Verity, Commander Verity. A voice called from beyond the collapse. Here, Juno, Verity called back, hastily gathering her scattered clothing. Within minutes, Verity's hunting party had cleared enough debris for them to squeeze through. Juno, the younger hunter, gave them a knowing look but said nothing as they emerged dust-covered and disheveled. The council has called an emergency session, Juno reported. They detected unidentified energy signatures near the southern sea. Verity and Nolan exchanged glances. The male colony, unknown. But Sophia is calling for immediate security protocols. They hurried back through the tunnels, emerging into a colony in disarray. Women rushed to and fro, gathering weapons and supplies. Alarm crystals pulsed red throughout the settlement. The council chamber buzzed with tense voices when they arrived. Sophia stood at the center, her ancient face tight with anger. The exiles have violated the boundary, she announced. Sensor. Arrays detect vessels approaching the neutral zone. Talia stepped forward, scientific instruments in hand. The energy signatures match no known profile in our database. This could be something else entirely. Or it could be them, with new technology, Sophia countered. She fixed her gaze on Nolan. Perhaps related to this male's arrival. A coincidence I find difficult to believe. Nolan stepped forward despite Verity's warning hand. My rescue beacon broadcasts on standard emergency frequencies. If there's a male colony with any level of technology, they might have detected it just as you did. The chamber fell silent, considering his words. Then they come for you, Talia said finally, which means they value their own. Or they come to reclaim what they see as their territory, Sophia hissed. With a male spy already infiltrated among us. Enough, Verity's voice cut through the chamber. We don't know their intentions, but I know this, neither isolation nor conflict has served us. Both our societies face extinction from the same cosgenetic limitation. She moved to stand beside Nolan. I propose a third option: contact, negotiation, an exchange of knowledge, and she hesitated. Perhaps more. Murmurs rippled through the council. Cephia's face contorted with rage. But before she could speak, the ground shook violently. This was no minor tremor, but a sustained quake that sent decorative items crashing to the floor. "The great tree," someone cried. "Its support systems are failing." Talia's instruments flashed urgent warnings. "Root system collapse imminent. The decay has reached critical levels. We evacuate." Verity commanded, taking charge as panic threatened. "To overtake the chamber. Emergency protocols, just as we've practiced." As the council members scrambled to organize their people, Nolan pulled Verity aside. "This isn't coincidence. The timing." Sophia, Verity nodded grimly. "She'd rather destroy everything than relinquish control." "Then we need to move faster than she expects." Nolan glanced at his emergency beacon. "And I have an idea how." That night, as evacuation preparations continued around them, Nolan modified his beacon with components Verity had smuggled from the colony's technical stores. "If I can boost the signal and change the frequency," he explained, fingers working delicately with the circuitry, "I might be able to communicate directly with whoever's approaching from the southern sea. And if it's not your people, if it's the exiles," Nolan looked up, meeting her gaze, "then we offer them the same thing. A chance to end 3 centuries of separation before both our societies collapse." Verity leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. "Sophia will never allow it. That's why we're not asking permission." He sealed the beacon's casing. 25 days until my people arrive. But now we have a new countdown. How long? Before those ships reach us. 2 days at most," Verity whispered. "Whatever happens, Nolan, I want you to know." He silenced her with a kiss. "Tell me after we save both our peoples." New beginnings. Approaching vessels made landfall at dawn. From their vantage point on a ridge overlooking the beach, Nolan and Verity watched 7 sleek crafts slide onto the shore, their hulls gleaming with a material similar to the colony's crystalline technology. "Not my people's design," Nolan confirmed, lowering his makeshift telescope. "These must be from the male colony." The modified beacon beside them pulsed steadily, broadcasting Nolan's carefully crafted message, a plea for peaceful contact, an explanation of the shared crisis, and a warning about Cephia's faction. "They're responding," Verity said as the beacon's receiver crackled to life. A deep voice emerged from static. "Identify yourselves." Nolan took a breath. "I am Nolan Foster, scout for the Terran Alliance, stranded on your planet. With me is Hunt, Commander Verity of Nixa Colony. We come seeking peaceful dialogue." Silence stretched for what felt like eternity, then approached slowly, unarmed. They descended to the beach, hands raised. From the lead vessel emerged a group of men with skin that shimmered blue like sunlight through ice, the male counterpart to the women's purple iridescence. Their leader stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, his expression guarded. "I am Director Orion of the Astrum Colony," he announced. "Your message spoke of crisis and opportunity. Explain." Over the next hour, Nolan and Verity laid out everything: the genetic degradation affecting both societies, the imminent collapse of the Great Tree Colony, Cephia's faction and their plans, and the approaching Terran rescue mission. 300 years of separation has brought both our peoples to extinction's edge, Verity concluded. "We need each other to survive." Orion's face remained impassive. "And why should we trust the descendants of those who exiled us?" "Because I trust her," Nolan said simply. "And because neither of you has a choice if you want your children to have a future." Before Orion could respond, the sound of approaching vehicles interrupted them. Sophia had arrived with a contingent of warriors, their weapons trained on both the newcomers and Nolan and Verity. "Traitors," Sophia spat. "Conspiring with the exiles against your own people, against extinction," Verity corrected, standing her ground. "I've seen the archives, Sophia. I know the truth of the separation." "How much longer will you let ancient hatred doom us all?" Sophia raised her weapon. "Better extinction than contamination." What happened next unfolded with shocking speed. Talia emerged from behind Cephia's guards, a scientific instrument in hand. "Enough," she declared. Activating the device, Sophia and her most loyal followers froze in place, caught in some kind of stasis field. "Forgive the dramatics," Talia said, approaching Orion with an outstretched hand. "But we've been working toward this day for decades. There are those among both our peoples who never accepted the separation." Orion's stern expression softened slightly. "My mother spoke of you. The network, underground communication between colonies," Talia confirmed. "Preparing for reconciliation when the time was right." A new sound drew everyone's attention skyward, the unmistakable roar of spacecraft entering atmosphere. "Right on schedule," Nolan grinned. "My people have excellent timing." The Terran rescue ship was larger than Nolan had expected clearly. They'd sent more than a simple extraction team. As it landed on the beach, creating a third point in their impromptu gathering, Nolan felt a strange sense of completion. Captain Alara Thorne emerged, flanked by her crew. "Scout Foster," she nodded. "Your distress signal indicated a first contact situation requiring diplomatic intervention." "I see you weren't exaggerating, Captain," Nolan saluted, then gestured to the assembled representatives of both colonies. "May the first present the people of Nixa and Astrum. They have a proposition that might interest the Alliance." The negotiations lasted through the day and into the night. Captain Thorne, after initial skepticism, recognized the unique opportunity before them to human-compatible societies, with advanced biotechnology seeking Alliance membership and assistance with their genetic crisis. The Alliance can provide genetic engineering expertise, medical support, and neutral ground for your reunification, she concluded, in exchange for cultural exchange and limited technology sharing. As the formal discussions concluded, Nolan found Verity standing alone at the shoreline, watching the three moons rise over the ocean. "So," he said, joining her, "you're about to become a historic figure, the woman who reunited your people." "We reunited them," she corrected, her hand finding his. "What happens now?" "Your mission is complete. Your people have arrived." Nolan gazed at the settlement, taking shape on the beach, temporary structures being erected, as members of both colonies cautiously mingled under Alliance supervision. "Interesting thing about first contact specialists," he said, drawing her closer. "We're required to remain as cultural liaisons during the integration period." "And how long is that period?" Verity asked, a smile playing at her lips. "Standard protocol says 5 years minimum." His hands traced the curve of her waist. "Though in special cases, permanent assignment can be requested." Verity's twilight eyes searched his face. "And is this a special case?" Skyman, in answer, Nolan kissed her beneath the alien moons. No darkness to hide in now. No crisis forcing their hands, just the promise of new beginnings for two peoples long separated. And for themselves, on the beach behind them, members of the Nixa and Astrum colonies shared their first meal together in 3 centuries. Children would be born in coming years with skin that shimmered in shades of both purple and blue, inheritors of a reunited legacy. And somewhere in the archives, the records would show how a man who fell from the stars helped heal the wound of separation, bridging worlds that should never have been divided.